Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll be splitting my time this evening with the member for Kitchener South Hespeler. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for this opportunity to stand this evening to speak on the urgent crisis facing the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. And I want to start by thanking the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, for seeking this emergency debate. While we disagree on nearly all matters of policy and ideology, I've always respected my colleagues' passion for the protection of minorities abroad. When that passion takes the form of a Conservative member on the opposite side standing up to defend the rights of a Muslim minority, I take note, and I think all members of this House should as well. Madam Speaker, the focus of my speech this evening is primarily from my perspective as a former war crimes prosecutor who worked at the Rwandan Genocide Tribunal on behalf of the United Nations. Madam Speaker, that tribunal was established in 1997, 3 years after the Rwandan genocide. Madam Speaker, that experience taught me that even the best of intentions, if not done contemporaneously, will have limited effect. That's why I was very proud to stand with my colleagues in this chamber about 1 year ago, when we decided collectively as a parliament to act quickly and decisively to aid Yazidis. Not years after the fact, Madam Speaker, but rather while their persecution at the hands of Daesh was ongoing. Fast forward to now, Madam Speaker, we know that the plight of the Rohingya Muslims in Rakhine State is desperate, and that there's a complete absence of leadership on the part of the Myanmar leader to stop ethnic cleansing that is unfolding before our very eyes. A moral failure, as the Prime Minister and the Subcommittee on International Human Rights have called it. But it's not just parliamentarians who are taking note, Madam Speaker. Everyday Canadians are as well. In my riding of Parkdale High Park, I have heard from worshippers who attended the Jummi Mosque and the Hamza Mosque, but I've also heard from many others, Canadians of different faiths, backgrounds, races and religions, all united by their horror in what they are witnessing and reading about in the media. They are seeking action. So I want to turn to the action taken thus far. I want to turn to some of the precise words that have been used by the Prime Minister in his very terse letter to Aung San Suu Kyi, because I appreciate this has been the matter of some of the debate this evening. In his letter dated September 18th, the Prime Minister opened with, quote, "It is a profound surprise, disappointment and dismay that your fellow Canadians have witnessed your continuing silence in the face of the brutal oppression of Myanmar's Rohingya Muslim people." The Prime Minister then goes on to reference the Peace Prize that was bestowed upon Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, and quoting her when she said, quote, "Disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings will enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspirations of the common people." But then the Prime Minister continues to say, quote, "The situation in Rakhine State betrays these very moral commitments. Since violence has erupted on August 25th, reports indicate that 415,000 refugees, 70% of whom are women and children, have fled to Bangladesh to date, with the additional people being internally displaced. Emblematic of long-standing discrimination and gross violations of human rights, reports cite the disproportionate use of force, extrajudicial killings, and burnings of village by security forces. The Prime Minister continues, landmines are allegedly being laid with systemic violations of international law, which, if established by a court of law, amount to crimes against humanity. I'd concur in that. This is an aside by me as a war crimes prosecutor. I'd concur in that legal analysis. The United Nations is denied access to investigate fully, and international humanitarian agencies lack safe and unhindered access to help all those in need. The Prime Minister then goes on to state that, as my Minister of Foreign Affairs has stated, there is no escaping the conclusion reached by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights that the situation seems a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. And as he winds up the letter, he states that the responsibility for resolving this crisis falls squarely upon you, Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, and upon the military leadership of Myanmar, including Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing. Madam Speaker, I read to you that text verbatim because it's important to note in this chamber that the leadership and the position of the Government of Canada has been made clear by the Prime Minister. And in this chamber just yesterday, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Foreign Affairs herself was unequivocal when she stated, "We are absolutely seized by the urgent question of the persecution of the Rohingya. Based on reports from the region, this is ethnic cleansing, and it is important for Canada to condemn it in the strongest possible terms and to act. It is important particularly to call on the military leadership to cease this horror." Madam Speaker, why are we debating this issue tonight? We have a motion that's been moved, but I'd be keen to share with you some important facts about what is happening on the ground in Myanmar. While this issue was studied at length by the Subcommittee on International Human Rights, I must take a moment to outline the most recent situation. Since August 25th, we understand that 3,000 Rohingya have been estimated to be killed. Almost 480,000 Rohingya refugees have fled Myanmar to Bangladesh. 190,000 arrivals in makeshift camps. 89,000 arrivals in host communities. 201,000 arrivals in new spontaneous sites. Reports indicate that tens of thousands of Rohingya Muslims remain stranded in northern Rakhine State without access to basic supplies such as food and water, Madam Speaker. Amnesty International has also been clear in its assessment. They have reported that Myanmar security forces and vigilante mobs are burning down entire villages and shooting people at random as they try to flee. Amnesty's analysis shows how a quote, orchestrated campaign of systematic burnings has targeted Rohingya villages across northern Rakhine State for almost 3 weeks. Amnesty's crisis response director has stated, quote, the evidence is irrefutable. The Myanmar security forces are setting northern Rakhine State ablaze in a targeted campaign to push the Rohingya people out of Myanmar. Make no mistake, this is ethnic cleansing, end quote. She is also quoted as saying, quote, there is a clear and systematic pattern of abuse here. Security forces surround a village, shoot people fleeing in panic, and then torch houses to the ground. In legal terms, these are crimes against humanity, systematic attacks and forcible deportation of civilians, end quote. Madam Speaker, as has been stated previously, our government has been continuously engaged on this file and continues to do so. For example, we've taken the following concrete actions. At the United Nations General Assembly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs engaged in bilateral meetings with the European Union, with Indonesia and Turkey on this very issue. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has also spoken with the foreign ministers of Germany, Bangladesh, Norway, Sweden, and with Mr. Kofi Annan on what actions the international community can take to address this crisis. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs has spoken with Bangladesh's High Commissioner in Canada and raised this issue. And the Prime Minister, in the very letter that I started out reading to you, has said, quote, the Myanmar security forces to end all violence and to hold all perpetrators of human rights violations accountable on the basis of independent and impartial investigation. That's the call out he's made. He continues, this is the Prime Minister's words, the Myanmar government must welcome publicly the return of all Rohingya refugees, and this must be accompanied by a firm commitment to address their citizenship, equality before the law, and the realization of rights for all ethnic minorities. I also call upon the government to provide full access to the UN Commissioner for Human Rights and to facilitate safe and unimpeded international humanitarian access to provide life-saving assistance to all civilian populations. We've also made a request as a government, Madam Speaker, that our ambassador be granted access to visit Rakhine State. Our government continues to support the Rohingya people through aid, $27.47 million in development assistance in 2015-2016, through reputable third-party groups such as the Joint Peace Fund. That included $4.3 million in humanitarian assistance funding to meet the immediate needs of conflict-affected and displaced populations, including the Rohingya. To date, in 2017, Madam Speaker, we have announced $9.18 million in humanitarian assistance to the region to address this crisis. This funding is for things like the therapeutic feeding of pregnant women, clinical care and psychosocial counseling, emergency obstetric and newborn care, child-friendly spaces. We haven't stopped there, Madam Speaker. We've taken action including sanctions against Myanmar, a freeze on assets in Canada of any designated Myanmar nationals, an arms embargo, including prohibitions on importing and exporting arms. While those actions are important, I strongly believe that we can and must do more in terms of additional concrete action. And I'll return to what I said at the outset, Madam Speaker. My experience at the Rwandan War Crimes Tribunal taught me clearly that contemporaneous action is literally vital when horrific violations of human rights are unfolding before the very eyes of the international community. And by concrete actions, I mean taking steps to directly assist the Rohingya Muslim minority itself, the victims of the very ethnic cleansing that is unfolding. Madam Speaker, we are working hard to restore Canada to a place of international engagement and international leadership. And to my mind, international leadership means several things. It means building on the strong statements we have made and continuing to speak out. International leadership means building a coalition of like-minded nations, allies who believe in the importance of international human rights and the rule of law. International leadership means working creatively. If access to Rakhine State is thus far not forthcoming, it means working with allies like Bangladesh to put international observers in border states. And international leadership also has a domestic manifestation, Madam Speaker. It means empowering Canadians of all faiths, backgrounds, and races who are determined that the Rohingya will not be forgotten and aiding them in their efforts. International leadership, Madam Speaker, means not shying away from solutions that can help desperate victims now before it's too late. To quote our dear departed colleague and friend, international leadership means using our heads but following our hearts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my friend from Parkdale High Park for his thoughtful intervention tonight. And in fact, his experience as a war crimes prosecutor and his Canadian experience as a Somali Canadian who came to this country for religious freedom and for the opportunity we provided where a minority was being attacked. His family, the family of my best friend Riaz Lalani, has made Canada a better place. So my question to him is, what is Canada's opportunity or potential here? When the Aga Khan addressed our Parliament, it was before he was here, but I'm sure he followed it, he said that cosmopolitan civil societies like Canada can be, quote, voices of hope for people living in fear, unquote. I agree, Madam Speaker. So I think Canada's responsibility is to be that voice of hope. He mentioned the terse letter, to use his terms, the Prime Minister wrote the Principal Secretary Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar. But shouldn't there be a voice of hope at the United Nations, Madam Speaker? Shouldn't Canada be using our privileged platform to do more than just write terse letters? Can he tell this House that he's going to push the Minister, the Prime Minister, to make sure that religious freedom, and particularly the plight of the Rohingya people, gets more attention in the Prime Minister's trips and speeches overseas?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
I thank the member for Durham for his question and for his interventions this evening and for contributing to this very, very important debate. What I can say is that the voice that Canada needs to have is the voice that we have started to reclaim since 2015. And by that I mean, Madam Speaker, a voice that speaks out on the world stage, that is engaged internationally with like-minded nations, but also with nations that perhaps sometimes need a bit of coaxing along the path towards protection of rights and protection of minorities. And what I mean by that, Madam Speaker, is that Canada very clearly has pivoted since the most recent election towards a stance of engagement, towards embracing international institutions, the UN, the UNHCR, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, for example. We've been told again and again about the clear statements that the Minister has made, that the Prime Minister has made, and I can assure the member opposite that as a member of this government caucus and as a member of this chamber, I will continue to advocate for the human rights that I've spent my entire lifetime defending, both domestically and abroad.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to my honourable colleague for Parkdale High Park, I thank him for his speech. I was unable to get a comment into the member for Durham, but I recall vividly the times that the former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, shunned the United Nations. If that stage was so important to stand up for human rights, where was he? I don't want this debate to become partisan, and I'm afraid my friend from Durham was one of the few partisan speeches I've heard, but I would want to remind him and ask the honourable member for Parkdale High Park, how is it that in secret we had a negotiated agreement with the People's Republic of China which binds Canada for 31 years so they can bring secret claims against us? How often did Stephen Harper ask them about human rights?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I thank the member from Saanich Gulf Islands for her intelligent intervention, as always, and her contributions to this chamber. The point has to be made again and again, Madam Speaker, that there is an importance in international engagement. Canada was once known internationally as a broker of international relations, as a country that punched far above its weight. With the disengagement we saw under the previous government, unfortunately, that status declined, resulting ultimately in our not standing for a position in the Security Council. We've turned the page on that in terms of our response to the Syrian refugee crisis, in terms of what we are trying to do with boosting up international institutions, in terms of the funding and the aid that we are delivering internationally, in terms of our leadership, in terms of feminization of our international aid and development policies. And in respect of the Rohingya, I'm confident in the leadership of the Prime Minister, in the leadership of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and in the passion of Canadians in ensuring that we as parliamentarians of all stripes, and again, it shouldn't be partisan, are raising this issue in important debates like this evening's in the House tonight.